Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are demystifying an absolute cornerstone of modern cybersecurity, endpoint detection and response, or as we all know it, EDR. Let's face it, our digital footprint is expanding massively, and securing our modern devices, everything from laptops right up to servers, has literally never been more critical.
But before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, I want you to ask yourself something. Is the traditional antivirus you rely on actually protecting you against modern, sophisticated threats? For decades, we've trusted basic antivirus software to just run in the background and keep our machines safe. But as threat actors have evolved and gotten smarter, the reality is that traditional security just doesn't cut it anymore. And that is exactly why we're here today.
Okay, let's dive into this. We are going to cover 5 key areas today. First, we'll outline the current endpoint security problem. Then, we'll go beyond the antivirus to understand what's missing. Next, we'll break down how EDR actually works, followed by a look into telemetry, our digital black box. And finally, we'll bring the whole shebang together by looking at detection and response.
All right, let's start with part 1, the endpoint security problem and securing the remote workforce.
Imagine you're a SOC analyst today. Your job isn't just protecting a single secure office building anymore, you are protecting a vastly scattered network. The massive shift to remote work has pushed our endpoints, our laptops, phones, tablets, way outside the safe, protected perimeter of the traditional corporate network. So the really crucial point here is that while organizations used to build these giant, heavy walls to protect the network itself, endpoints are now just everywhere. We're talking coffee shops, home Wi-Fi networks, airport lounges, and that exposes them to advanced threats that completely bypass standard protections like corporate firewalls.
That brings us to part 2, beyond the antivirus, and what we'll call the airport security analogy. To truly grasp why EDR is such a game-changer for this problem, we need a good way to visualize the difference between old-school antivirus and modern EDR. Think of your computer, the endpoint itself, as an airport. Your traditional antivirus? That's the immigration checkpoint. It monitors incoming passengers and strictly checks their passports against the database of known criminals. If there's a match, boom, they're blocked. But EDR is a completely different beast. EDR acts as a security officer stationed inside the airport, constantly watching the CCTV cameras and motion sensors. And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference here. Antivirus relies on basic signature matching, while EDR relies on continuous behavior-based monitoring.
Which leads us to a pretty fatal flaw in traditional security. What happens if a criminal has a completely clean record and just breezes right past that immigration check? What if the person walking through is a professional, highly trained to evade basic known security checks? Well, suddenly, the airport has an undetected, active threat wandering around inside, and that immigration check at the front door is utterly useless to stop them.
And this is exactly why EDR exists. Even if an advanced threat slips right past that antivirus immigration check, the EDR security officers are watching what they do next. They're constantly hunting for behavioral anomalies. Are they roaming a little too close to restricted areas in the system? Are they acting suspicious? Are they leaving unattended bags? Or, in computer terms, dropping weird, suspicious files? EDR gives you organization-wide visibility into exactly these kinds of behaviors.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Think about a 6-step phishing attack. Say a user opens a perfectly normal-looking Word document from an email. A malicious macro silently executes in the background and spawns PowerShell. An obfuscated command then downloads a payload and injects it straight into a legitimate Windows process, something like svchost.exe, basically handing the attacker full remote access. Now, a traditional antivirus might look at this and mark it as completely clean because the tools being used, Word, PowerShell, svchost, are all legitimate. There's no known signature to trigger on. But an EDR observes the behavior. It knows Word absolutely should not be spawning PowerShell to inject code into a system process. EDR catches the thief acting suspiciously once they're already inside the airport.
Let's shift gears to Section 3, how EDR actually works, specifically the agents and the console.
So, how exactly does it provide this incredible level of visibility across thousands of totally scattered devices? Well, it all starts with the EDR agent, which is sometimes called a sensor. You deploy these agents directly inside the endpoints. They are literally the eyes and ears of your security team. They sit right there on the ground, continuously monitoring every single activity and streaming that information out in real time. Plus, they could even perform some basic behavior and signature detections all on their own.
All of that real-time data flows straight up into the centralized EDR console. If the agents are the eyes and ears, the console is absolutely the brain. It takes massive amounts of raw data from every single agent, correlates it, and applies some incredibly complex machine learning algorithms. It matches everything against global threat intelligence feeds, and when these dots connect to actually form a detection, the console triggers an alert. Crucially, it prioritizes that alert for the analyst, ranking it anywhere from informational all the way up to critical severity. This gives the team a truly holistic view of the entire organization's health.
Which brings us to Section 4, telemetry, the digital black box, and the evidence left behind.
Now, what exactly is this data flowing from the agents to the console? That data is what we call telemetry. Think of it as the digital black box of an endpoint. It contains absolutely everything a SOC analyst could possibly need for detection and investigation. Now, what's really interesting here is that telemetry doesn't just trigger alarms. It actually allows a security analyst to perfectly reconstruct the timeline of an attack. You can see exactly what happened right up to the moment of impact.
So, what's actually inside this black box? It tracks process executions and terminations, every single network connection attempt, all command line activity, file and folder modifications, and changes to the registry. Advanced threats are incredibly stealthy. They use legitimate utilities just to hide in plain sight. Individually, a command line executing or a registry modification might seem entirely harmless, nothing to worry about. But when you observe all this detailed telemetry together, a completely different story emerges. The EDR connects these seemingly innocent, isolated actions to reveal those advanced, stealthy attacks.
And that takes us to our final section, detection and response, and how we empower the SOC analyst.
So how does this technology actually empower those analysts working on the front lines? Well, a robust EDR solution is built on three main pillars. First up is visibility. EDR structures telemetry so analysts can see the entire process tree. It's literally a visual map of which processes spawned which, complete with full historical activity timelines. Second is detection. It flags deviations from baseline behaviors and can even catch nasty fileless malware that only ever resides in the computer's memory. And third is response. This allows the analysts to take swift, direct action right on the endpoint without ever having to leave their centralized console.
When we compare this to traditional detection, it is honestly night and day. Old-school antivirus relies heavily on basic signature matching, but EDR? EDR utilizes advanced detection techniques. It uses anomaly detection to spot unusual behavior. It applies complex machine learning algorithms. It even automatically maps its detections against the MITRE attack framework. So, for example, it instantly tells an analyst that a newly scheduled task is actually being used for the tactic of persistence. It gives you the full context instantly.
And when that context reveals a true threat, the raw power an analyst has to respond is just staggering. With literally just a few clicks in the EDR console, an analyst can completely isolate a host from the network so the infection can't spread any further. They can terminate a malicious process in real time, quarantine files, or execute remote access to pull event logs, registry hives, and memory dumps for deep forensic analysis. They can stop an attack dead in its tracks.
Ultimately, EDR isn't just some software you install and forget about. It operates as the eyes, ears, and hands of the modern security operations center. And it's really important to remember that EDR is a host-only solution. It's focused on handling the endpoints. In a fully mature environment, it works as part of a much larger security ecosystem, seamlessly integrating with firewalls and feeding into a central SIEM system alongside your email gateways and data loss prevention tools.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. As businesses continue to operate further and further beyond traditional borders, relying on a simple immigration check at the front door just isn't a viable strategy anymore. With remote endpoints scattered everywhere across the globe, who is watching the CCTV cameras in your digital airport right now? Thank you so much for learning with us, and stay curious.